So.
Hey, Alex.
How's it going?
Good, it's good.
Hey. Hey, is that Edwin?
Yeah, so I might start with kind of my section of the announcements, which is just kind of cover what you most of them trying to change to adjust. So today's a little bit different. So we're going to do a little bit of
that's good.
LeetCode, and afterwards we're going to go into a discussion, which I think is going to be great for a lot of us. It's a conversation that I've had with a lot of people individually. A decent amount of people are in this group, and I've had this conversation about like how COVID's going to change the world and how potentially it's going to change the software engineering world along with it. And I think that's going to be a good thing for a lot of the more experienced folks to kind of be able to speculate a little bit on things and then hear other people's opinions on their speculations, and also hear, just hear in general. So that's kind of the new thing we're introducing today. We're also trying to do YouTube Live, and so part of that is that some Discord isn't inherently very accessible to a lot of people. There is some kind of debate over whether to move to another chat-based service like Zoom or Google Hangouts. I think Discord might have a very good benefit in that it's very easy to kind of hop in between chat rooms. So one of the things that a lot of these like chat-based Hangouts don't have is the ability to the ability to have multiple conversations. So oftentimes what you'll have is one big conversation, and that'll be great for a particular thing, but if you want to ask a question or if you want to hop into a different chat room, that tends to be difficult. Whereas I think Discord has some features that could potentially enable that. Not that we've actually seen people doing this, but that's part of the motivating factor behind choosing Discord. We're still kind of in the looks for figuring out if we're going to move back to a physical location when this is all done. So we've looked into some locations. It's on the back of our minds. But at the end of the day, it's going to be virtual for the time being, and it's going to be virtual for at least a decent amount of time. But eventually, we definitely want to have something that's a physical meetup, or at least some way to get people into a room and talking in person. I think that's largely it. Tom, do you have anything that you might want to
add? Hey man, I'm sorry. I'm busy with the streaming here. Can you? I'm good. Thanks. Hello?
Okay. Yeah.
No. I mean, I'm sorry.
Yeah. Well, so one of the other things that I want to add is the difference between various levels, and so I've been meaning to kind of address this over time, perhaps when we get more momentum, and I think it may help with the momentum. And part of it is that some senior people want things like more discussions. Some junior people want things that are a little bit more hands-on and a little bit more from the ground up. So I have been considering kind of making it 2 separate nights a week, which naturally would require a little bit more work. I don't think we're quite at that place, but perhaps if this takes off and perhaps if this is an important thing, then we will see. Then we will kind of follow with that. Yeah, so that's mostly on my end. Otherwise, we're going to move back to Edwin presenting on a LeetCode question, and then after that, we'll kind of move to a discussion. So Edwin, if you want to kind of hop on and stream your LeetCode, then we can kind of hop into that.
Yep, sounds good. I will try to stream now. Let me see. Yeah, it seems like I need to put it in the same window.
There should be a way to stream a screen or a window. So a window is going to be like a Chrome window, whereas a screen is going to be like your desktop screen. So if you do go live,
yeah, I just can't seem to find my Chrome for some reason in that window. Let me just run as a window, and then instead of a workspace. So let me do that. Yeah, I seem to be able to get it. All right. Yep.
Awesome. And for anyone joining, you have to kind of click on the live button that's next to Edwin's name in order to join a stream, and then watch what he's doing.
All right. So can everybody see my Chrome?
Yep. Thanks, Edwin.
Yep. Looks good. Yep. Yeah, I think, yeah, I'll just echo what Matt said, and I do think Discord is really good in terms of rooms and streaming, but obviously not everybody can. There is a barrier to entry, as you just seen now. Okay, so yeah, so let's just quickly go through this question. I won't take more than 10 minutes on this. So this is a very famous dynamic programming question. So I've been getting requests to do more recursion practice and especially more dynamic programming. And dynamic programming is essentially just a fancy way of saying recursion. So basically, we're just having fun with recursion for tonight. So this question is asking, given 2 words, word 1 and word 2, essentially 2 arguments, find the minimum number of operations required to convert word 1 to word 2. So we have 3 operations permitted on a word. We can insert a character, delete a character, or replace a character. So this is a famous distance known as a Levenshtein distance that allows us to convert one word to another word by just performing these 3 operations. So it's very intuitive, and our task right now is to implement the Levenshtein distance, which is a subset of edit distance. Between 2 words, and it's used a lot in terms of comparing string similarity between 2 words. So it's very relevant, and also it's a good way for us to practice recursion. So let's start with this first example. Given word 1, horse, where you need to convert it to ROS, to the word ROS using the minimum number of operations, and we can only use an insert character, delete a character, or replace a character. So in this explanation, just so we're very clear, so in order to convert word 1, horse, to ROS, this is the minimum number of operations. It's 3, and it's essentially we first replace H with R. Then when we have this new word ROS, we remove R in the middle, and then once we remove R in the middle, we have the word rose, and then we remove the character E at the end, and then we get the ROS of what we're essentially finding. So what you should be thinking in your head right now is essentially a brute force solution, and the brute force solution would thinking to ourselves is how do we essentially try each of the combinations of inserting a character, delete a character, and replace a character at every single point of the word horse, right? And then if we think about it some more, a more elegant solution would be essentially how do we actually compare the word one and the word we want to convert it to, word two, in such a way that we can modify the and try to keep the number of operations as few as possible from word one and word two. So instead of just looking at word one, we also want to leverage as much as possible word two. So thinking about essentially how do we keep the minimum number, and also how do we essentially traverse word one and try each of the combinations, it lends itself very well to a recursive solution. So when it comes to making a recursive solution, I always like making a helper function. It's definitely not necessary, but I think it helps a lot in terms of just calling a recursive function inside the regular function that we're given, the min distance. And we're going to start with essentially index pointers. So index pointers would essentially be a lot faster than if we were to slice the word. If you're familiar with Python, slicing the word essentially would be the slice notation with the colon. You would be doing the word one and doing the that colon where you start at point 0 and then you slice all the way to the end. But I just really want to start with index pointers because that's essentially how we think about this. Is we're really starting with what is the exact index of each of the words and how do we compare the two together. And I'm going to actually start with 0 and 0. So both word 1 and word 2 each respectively starts at index position 0. And then let's actually define the helper function here. And we could say word 1 index here, and then word 2 it will be argument word index. And now that we have essentially both our indexes, and when we're calling this helper function, we're starting at index 0. When it comes to a recursive solution, we always want to start with the base case. So we start with x. Essentially, x would be word 1 underscore index, and y would be word 2 underscore index. So I'll refer to them as x and y. But when we come to spell it out, you always want to make it as clean as possible to the exact programmer. But when it comes to, for example, the first word's index, or x, we want to make sure that in the base case, it should be straightforward to know at what point we should end. And of course, we should end when the index is either greater than or equal to the length of the word 1. Right? And then once we reach that stopping point, what happens if we still have stuff remaining in the second word? Because it's certainly possible that when we've actually finished our traversal of the first word, we would still have a remainder of the second word that's still present. So then we have to, and then that would be the number of operations needed to finish up the rest of the second word. So as a base case, what we should do is we actually should return the second word, well, the length of the second word, and we should subtract the word 2 index, because if we've moved the index of the word 2, or we've moved the pointer of word 2 to further to the right, then we should also just take the remainder of word 2 index and the length of word 2, and that will give us a remnant of what is currently the remaining part of word 2. So by similarity, let's also do the same for to finish up the base case. Let's also do the same thing. Is if our word 2 index is greater than the length of word 2, we should also have similar logic where we return the length of the remaining word 1 minus word 1's remaining index. So that would be our base case, and that would help us track and execute the recursion. So now here comes the really fun part: is what do we do when let's say horse is very similar to horses, and then when we essentially go through the first word and we're comparing it with the second word, and essentially they're the same at the same index position. So then what we could do is we can actually skip and increment both of the indices and push them one further to the right. Remember, we're starting at the 0th index for both of the word. So we're starting at the very left at the letter H for horse, and when we're traversing word 1, we're just moving the index position from 0 to 1 to 2 to 3 to 4. And if they share the same exact letter and character as the second word, then we should just increment, we should push out both indices of both of the words. So if word 1, at word 1 index is equal to word 2 index, we should essentially continue the recursion, but let's increment the word 1 index by 1 and the word 2 index, or y, by 1. So that's if they share the same exact character and the same exact index position. Now the fun part is where do we actually perform the insert, the delete, and replace operations and compare each one of them together, and how do we try out each of the combinations in play? So essentially, what we have to do is we have to think about what the differences are for each of these operations when we do a recursion. And when we think of recursion, I always like thinking of what we want to return, and then what do we want, trusting that the remaining rest of the recursive function is going to return what we want. At each step, what do we want to happen at each recursive step until it hits the base case? So obviously, because every time we insert, delete, or replace a character, we have to increase the number of our whole task is to find the number of operations required to convert word 1 to word 2, right? So every time we do an insert or a delete or replace a character, we have to essentially penalize ourselves by incrementing the minimum number of operations required by 1. And how do we essentially, when we perform the recursion, and we essentially traverse through the remaining and try out all the combinations of word 1, how do we change the indices? So when we insert a word, we're not exactly penalizing the first word. We don't have to increase the index. We don't have to move the index pointer of where the current word is. But what we do have to do is, because we're inserting a character, in order to, for example, you can see in this example in execution, we're adding the letter U here to make execution equal to execution. We're inserting the character U, so we have to. It's going to be essentially a flip of insert. So word 2 index here. Now for the fun part, replace. Remember, each of the insert, delete, and replace calls is +1. It essentially takes one additional step of operations that we have to return. But in terms of when we do the recursive step, what we have to do is we also have to increase each of the indices by 1. So we're moving the index pointers by 1 step to the right, so that we're looking at the next additional indexed character for both word 1 and word 2. So that essentially resolves the recursion, and because we want to find the minimum number of operations, we just don't want to run this recursion willy-nilly in terms of it returning all possible combinations or one possible combination. We just care about the minimum number of operations. So what we need to do is we need to return the minimum of these insert, delete, and replace recursive step. So let's try running the code. So we have a mistake here. So you can see that in our replace is exactly the same as delete. So we actually have to increase this by 1. And then let's run this code, because the replace, essentially, we have to move both index pointers for both the word 1 and word 2. You can see that this is accepted. Let's run it again. Let's submit it, and let's see if this works. And this will fail because LeetCode has a time limit exceeded. So even though this solution is valid, they really want your solutions to be very optimized, because recursion also is very demanding on the call stack. And this solution is not optimized at all. It's a very naive recursive solution. So what we need to do is, as Matt was talking about last week, we use memoize decorators in order to try to make sure that that it doesn't repeat a lot of the recursive steps as we try each of the combinations of insert, delete, and replace. So in practice, I think most people would use this LRU cache, and I'm going to set the max size to be none, and this should work. Let me try. Let me get rid of that. All right. So let's submit this, and essentially this helps shortcut a lot of the memoize. I don't want to write because we're short on time in terms of like passing in a memo argument here and then checking to see if it exists so a memo is just a fancy dictionary where you store pre-computed results. So I don't want to write that all down, so I just use the LRU cache and set the max size equals 0, max size equals none. So every time we call the helper with the same index pointers, it's going to use the pre-computed cache result instead of trying to recompute it again and again. And you can see that this is faster than 95% of most Python solutions, and that's because we're not using slice. We're using the LRU cache, and because we're using these index pointers, everything's going to be a lot faster, and also in terms of memory, it's going to be very optimized. But yeah, I think I took 15 minutes. So that's it for me. If you have any questions, let me know.
Awesome. Thank you, Edwin. As always, very great to hear from you, and thank you for taking the time to present on that.
Yep.
So up next, we're going to hop in. Let me get a Google Doc open. I'm going to present. So we're going to have this discussion coming up. The way I thought to do this was kind of to spend the first couple minutes almost kind of creating an outline of what we could talk about so that there is some structure to the conversation. Technology. Let me go live.
Did I miss Edwin talking about his new desktop?
That's the only thing that Lee cares about. I like it.
That's what I'm here for.
I think not all my parts have arrived yet, so maybe by the end of this week.
Awesome. Yeah. So maybe we could do that on the next one. But yeah. So this one, what I want to do was I want to have the conversation around like how we're experiencing changes in COVID, and particularly in how it's affecting technology. So there's obvious ones where like I want to add the topic of work from home culture, like work culture in general, and then as a subset have like work from home. So if anyone wants to blast out any topic that they think is relevant to this, feel free to unmute yourself and then can just shout it out.
You guys hear me? I'm just testing my mic.
Yes.
Okay, cool.
Loud and clear, Evan.
Thanks. I guess now I'm talking. I really like working from home, but I prefer going to the office. That's my team.
So right now what I'd like to do is just brainstorm where this kind of conversation can go. The like work culture can kind of be a thing. There's also like a conversation around, it's not a tech conversation, but a conversation around like real estate, right? I think real estate is an important thing that might change as a result of COVID, and I think it's definitely something that I've been thinking a lot about, particularly both from like a company culture, but also from like a living culture, or both from like a company standpoint, but from a personal standpoint as well.
I know we've been like staying home not that long relatively, but just like the impact on air quality has been significant. like kind of the lack of everyone being outside. It's almost been a positive in that way for
I want to know if this is going to drive people to startups or to big companies in the whole what are people going to do with job situations?
I'm sorry, can you say it again?
what?
Can you say can you repeat that? I'm sorry.
I'm curious people's opinion on like differing like job security and ability to work remotely and all this stuff. If you know COVID is going to drive people towards startups or towards big companies.
I think both.
It can drive in both directions. That's like Evan's answer that he likes working from home and he also likes working from the office.
Well, that's an awesome answer.
Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, so we can go into the details of all of these things right now, shape the discussion and where we think it's going to go, and keep it very high level and like what we could kind of talk about.
Yeah, in that same vein, in terms of work culture, I think also the type of work people want to do in the future has changed because of COVID. I think a lot of people are interested in working in medicine, but for me, I want to work on video games now because of the whole COVID situation, because everybody's just stuck at home. So that's also, I think it's going to drive what we want to do in our own jobs going forward.
Yeah, Trilogy kindly plastered me on their website, and I've actually gotten a lot of people reaching out to me on LinkedIn lately, asking about my opinion on the boot camp. And one thing that I've heard is that since everyone's like staying inside, everyone's like thinking about what they really want to do in life and yada yada yada. So I feel fortunate in one sense, but I'm also curious if everyone thinks that tech jobs are really the least risk or at the least risk right now. Or if they aren't, which tech jobs are at the highest risk right now? Of course, startups, but anything else?
One of the things I wanted to talk about is how people are socializing. I think I'm definitely the type of person who, before this, was like one of the big reasons I lived in the city was for the people, because I never thought that socializing online made sense. But I think nowadays there are, people are experimenting with it for good and bad. There are definitely some negative parts of it, but I do think there are also some positive parts of it.
I'd like to add also maybe how people are learning. That's looking very different from all age levels. Starting with students in like middle schools, elementary schools, high schools, they're all staying home and learning their computers for the first time in their lives. A lot of college students might be used to that. And also we're driven towards new softwares and technologies we haven't used before. This is my first time using Discord. You see a lot of these online classes offering discounted courses. So a lot more people, now that they're staying home, are taking these online courses left and right that I've been seeing advertised everywhere. So I think overall, how people are learning is looking very differently.
I agree with Aris, and to piggyback on what he just said, I just read somewhere today that I don't know if it's the state of New York or the city of New York, they like giving out like 10,000 tablets to senior citizens. So they even trying to reach that type of niche. So geographically speaking.
This is Alex. I'm really interested in thinking about how people are going to eat post-COVID, if we're going to rush back to restaurants, or if with all this practice of us cooking at home, the kind of meal delivery services, are they going to blow up? Is there going to be more people ordering like Blue Apron because they're into cooking now? That type of thing.
Yeah, hey, it's Mustafa. Yeah, it's actually interesting on that note too with shopping. Like we used to go out shopping a lot, but now we don't want to risk it. We have a kid, and we just order everything Instacart, which I never used before. And I knew about it, and it was always a good idea, but I never really had a reason to use it. So now we may just never go back because it's just easier. Why bother? Kind of goes into socializing. Yeah, but.
Just
Do you mind repeating that?
No. Oh, sorry. Just off of Mustafa's note, I think the realization that a lot of other things can be done from home as well, right? So we're realizing more and more that not just we can shop from home, and we can learn from home, and we can exercise from home. And I think people are starting to realize, and now we can. All of these people are realizing, hey, our work doesn't need to be in this physical space, right? So I think now that people are getting creative, and they're kind of forced to be creative to work away from their physical space, there's this realization of all these new spaces that exist that they otherwise wouldn't have spent the time to reflect on or realize were there in the first place.
Absolutely. I do have a feeling that restaurants will eventually go back up, though, because like people, maybe not right away. I think it'll be like 6 months or something, but people kind of would still want to socialize. Like I definitely, it's like two-way. It's like bifurcated. Like on one end, it's like I realize that it's very you could do a lot from home, but on the other way, it's like I really appreciate doing stuff outdoors. I'm like, oh, maybe I didn't appreciate it as much. Like a trip to like a nice tropical location right now would be amazing if there was no virus. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out.
Hey, Mustafa, I'm interested. How do you feel, like, in your industry in particular, I feel like there's often a lot of like pushback against the idea of like working from home. Like, traditionally we have to go to the office and whatnot. Are you seeing a lot of people kind of like change their mind on that? I'm actually not sure if you work in like a traditional office setting.
I never really did because, being on like the sales and or business side, where you're on outside, if you're finding as an outside rep, whatever capacity. But if you're outside where you get in your car and drive out and see customers, those jobs kind of just by necessity and definition, usually they sometimes will work from home. Because let's say if I see 2 customers by my house and then it's 3 o'clock and then I'm going to go to the office, which is an hour away, for example, it doesn't make sense. But yeah, I mean, now you're seeing not everybody did work from home, and the people who did, maybe it was one day here and there. Obviously now it's more long term. I think now, and in my company is a little more progressive about it as a company, but there are some managers who aren't. But I think now, if any manager later on would want to not have you work from home, they've kind of lost the moral authority to tell you, well, you can never work from home, because it's not a very plausible argument, because everybody's had to do it. So
interesting.
Yeah, but our CEO has actually sent out an email early on saying everybody must work, except for essential like manufacturing personnel and stuff like that. But everybody else that can work from home has to work.
Gotcha.
Can I add a point?
Yeah.
I'm sorry if this has already been covered, but I'd be interested in knowing like how to like network, how to like join organizations. I mean, part of the reason why I'm here is because I attended the boot camp taught by Matt. So it's like, if we're working remotely and we're not getting that opportunity to like interact and meet people, how do you kind of join these associations?
Yeah, awesome. One thing I want to add is like the taboo of personal space, which I think has drastically changed over time. This is something that you can kind of see in different cultures in different ways, but I feel like it's changing, and whether or not it's going to come back to where it was is, I think, up for discussion.
What, Matt? What do you? Can you elaborate on that? What do you mean that it's changing? Like, yeah.
So, like, there's this 6 feet of distance between people, and I think largely the way I've seen is people are adopting it. But I also think there's slowly like internalization of a stigma around that, where you don't want to be close to someone's personal space.
Right.
And so, right, like, what does it look like in a year from now, right? Is there still going to be a stigma around being super close to someone? And, right, like, there's also, like, a stigma around, like, coughing. As soon as someone coughs, all of a sudden people are like, oh, my God, you know, get away from me. Is that going to kind of stick and be internalized to our culture?
Right. I think there's going to be, like, different eras, you know, over, like, a year and a half, 2 years, which is, like, really, like, the post-wave one, you know, when we kind of start opening back up. I'm hearing that, you know, maybe things will be opened back up to some degree in 3-4 weeks, you know. So, but post-phase one, but, you know, really pre-phase two, if there is a phase two, you know, when they're saying this thing might rebound. And then, you know.
Another thing. Yeah, like, coming back in the fall. And I think it's, like, a big one.
Yes, I think that's going to be like a whole nother phase, but then I think there's going to be another phase which is post-vaccine. So I think there's like difference. Like I would say, for example, coughing. I think that would be a stigma up until, you know, potential phase two. Definitely, if a phase two comes, coughing will probably be worse of a stigma. If it doesn't come, then maybe it'll taper off. But then you know, something like after vaccine, post-vaccine, maybe coughing won't be a stigma. Because, you know, people have gotten over it.
Okay, so I feel like we have a pretty big list. If there's any kind of things I haven't missed, we can feel free to add them. This is kind of my offhand way of organizing it right now. I don't know if this is the best way to organize it, but we can kind of address as we see fit. And I'll probably actually move this up a little bit. So kind of the first thing to talk about is how work culture is going to change, and then the big thing there is work from home. Does anyone want to take that off and start with that?
Sure. So how do you want to just, you know, kind of make points and discuss each thing, Matt? Is that what you're thinking?
Oh yeah. Let me kind of explain what I'm thinking. Yeah. So what I want to do is create an agenda that has some sort of structure, but outside of that, what I want to do is then talk on each point, and then you can kind of share your own personal either opinions, your own personal insight on your own interactions with the thing, or share stories or things like that. One of the things I prefer people not to do, or one of the things that I think is important, is recognizing when you're either repeating a point or saying a point another way. I think that it's a good thing to oftentimes say something different, say the same thing but in a different way, but I think it's oftentimes important to know that you're emphasizing a point, not just, you know, adding new thoughts. But outside of that, just, yeah, so what I would like is, let's talk about work culture for a little bit and how that's going to change over time. And then we'll move on to like the differences between online and in person, and then we'll touch on all of these topics later. And naturally, there's going to be a lot of overlap between these things, but, you know, do your best to kind of contain the topic of discussion to the topic at hand.
Right. Sure. I can say something about working from home. I think you know. So I think with a lot of these things in general, that the coronavirus didn't create new trends necessarily for some things, but accelerated them. So, you know, what I mean by that is things were kind of headed in a certain direction anyways, but now they're just there. An example would be retail collapsing. Well, retail was going to collapse anyways. Like Macy's and those stores kind of just lost their way and they were going to collapse. I think working from home is one of those things where it was headed in that direction where people are able to work from home anyways, because, I mean, why not? We can do everything from our phone, everything from our computer. We could really do, not every job, some jobs, I know some jobs are still not working from home now, like manufacturing and that. So, but to a lot of degree, white collar office jobs, why do we even need to be in an office every day? Now, and that's where kind of going back to what I had said with the moral authority, I think a lot of people who would tell you never to work from home, those people have lost their moral authority. Now, there's a different category of people who maybe when don't not never work from home, but don't always work from home, and I think that will still be valid. I think there is still something to be said about going to the office and meeting with people. It's like, for example, in sales, sometimes there's a Monday morning mandatory meeting that you have to go into the office no matter what. Unless you're off or something. But something like that. These days we have to be in the office. The other days you can or cannot work from home. I think is probably what will take a hold.
So one of the things that I like to think about is like how there's a sort of like an investment necessary for a lot of these things, and I think work from home is definitely a good example for that, where there is a lot that you needed to invest in order to make a work from home culture very functional. And there are actually some good articles that I can look into after this about how organizations that are remote first ultimately have to put in that effort initially, but they reap a lot of the rewards from being remote first, right? So a lot of their meetings are already inherently done over Skype or Google Hangouts. They tend to take a lot more notes in these meetings because you have to. You can't just write them down on your own pad. You have to kind of broadcast those things. So I think there's a big capital investment. Not necessarily capital, but there was a big investment. And I think part of that is people have invested in their own personal work setups, right? I've known a lot of people who are talking about, yeah, I got a bunch of monitors, I got desk, I got all these things. Before COVID, I definitely didn't have that. And I also think that's true for the mental adjustment, right? And so I think you have to almost work on a routine in order to work from home. If you're commuting into work, you have that routine baked in, right? There's 10, 20, 30, 40 minutes of your morning routine is that actual commute that kind of can get you into the same headspace. Whereas for myself personally, the first couple of weeks of working from home, it was when do I start? How do I start? And I'd find myself kind of pushing back my start time. But once I got a routine, it started to feel a lot better.
Yeah, just to add to that, I think setting up a routine in a situation that I'm just kind of not used to whatsoever, kind of being home this long and having to work in this situation, is something I've definitely struggled with. And if anyone has any tips with actually getting into more of a rhythm, for example, my bedtime has definitely gotten pushed back as much as possible. Wake up time too. Just getting back into working out a little bit. So yeah, if anyone has any tips, I'm open to what everyone has to offer about getting into a rhythm and living a healthy lifestyle this way.
I don't. So Evan, have you you've never worked from home?
No, I have, but maybe 1 or 2 days during the week, every other week or something like that. Not consistently like this. I'm very used to going to the gym in the morning, doing my commute, going to work, doing my stuff at work, getting home, dinner. Like Matt said, almost my routine is centered around my commute for most of my working career.
Right.
So this is entirely new to me, in a sense, and definitely feeling building a routine around it has been difficult.
Right.
Can I ask, for people that have a somewhat long history working as programmers, software engineers, in a physical office, what have they been missing with these new working circumstances? I mean, I'm brand new, so I have nothing as a reference, but I'd be curious for people that have been working in this profession for a long time, what's their opinion?
I'm sorry, just going back to Evan. Evan, one thing that I noticed that helps me, it's obviously wake up in a certain time every day and take a shower and get dressed, but instead of going out the door, just sit down at my desk and start working. That kind of triggers me in a psychological way.
Yeah, like acting like you're going to go to work, but obviously cutting out the commute part.
Yes, like get dressed and like just sit down and start working.
Gotcha. Yeah, I've definitely been guilty of working in whatever I woke up in, which is gross. But yeah,
I know, and that doesn't help.
definitely does not.
I'm sorry, Ryan. Like I cut you off.
No, it's fine.
Yeah, I can touch on both these points. For Ryan, I think one of the big changes is partially around like impromptu conversations. So one of the big things about being in an office is that like if you have a question, you really can just bother someone immediately. And I know that like Slack and all of these things have minimal hurdles as well, but I think there's a huge difference between Slack and sitting next to someone. And I think sitting next to someone, you can kind of be like, hey, I have a question about what you built here. Do you mind explaining it to me? And they can either be like, oh, I'll get back to you in a little bit, or I'll start explaining to you right away. And I think even though there is all of these things online, I think there's a different sense of like hurdles, right? There's like mental hurdles to reaching out to people. And I've definitely had this in the work environment where I personally, like, even though I know I should probably be asking questions already, I would rather struggle with the problem more. And I find that to be more the case, where I'm struggling with the problem more, even though I know I should have already reached out. But I probably would have done something sooner if I was in the office.
Now, I'm learning how to code, and for me to do everything on my own and not have other people to talk to directly, it's quite challenging. And Googling everything actually is quite a waste of time because you never get exactly what you're looking for. So work from home in that case wouldn't be a very good thing.
I would just be curious though if this is something that would kind of go away as people got kind of adjusted to this working style, because as you guys been mentioning earlier, some things that were kind of a mental hurdle at first have kind of, you've been able to work through them, but again, it could change. So.
If you look at you mentioned this.
I mean, like
and you have the fact that everyone was sick for 2 years, and then in the 1920s you had everyone roaring into parties, and women were going to bars before then. Now they're going to bars. In the 20s, people will go back to being social and working at the office, but I think the office will be cut in half. When you have $150 a square foot for an office space and no one's going, or you're laying off a bunch of people, you have to think that what does it mean for the office space? Then the second thing is, it's like, why would you live in Manhattan in a 600 square foot space paying $4,000 when I could live in for $4,000 a month, I could get a mansion? And then at the same time, you have to think, maybe rentals will be something like, I rent the apartment with another person, I go into the city, the first and third week of the month, and the other person goes the second and fourth week. And then you have kind of a different rental.
That's really interesting, actually. That's a very interesting point.
I don't think for 50% of the time saving to share with one other person, I think it'll be very uncommon for people to share their living situation with someone else and do alternate living in the city weeks, right? This seems like possible if you were getting a lot more cost savings out of it, if you were doing it 10% of the time, maybe. But you're still paying for your whole apartment outside the city, and then you're paying for half of your apartment in the city. I just can't see that being a trend. It doesn't seem financially meaningful.
It's the same thing with the WeWork. No one thought to do doing co-working until everyone started doing it. It's just a question of learning. It's like, think Donald Trump when he became president. No one had a Twitter account in Congress. Now he's tweeting everything, and everyone has to get a Twitter account. So now all the congressmen and senators tweet. Things will go back to normal in some way, but it opens up, the possibility of new things. It's like we had casual Fridays. Now no one's wearing a tie.
Yeah, I think what's permanent is that remote work is now normalized. So the taboo is over for across industries. Even especially in white-collar knowledge industries. So I do think because of this new normalization of remote work, people are going to move more away from, say, dense urban centers like Manhattan in order to get bigger spaces, because they know that they're not going to commute every single weekday to Manhattan. So I think, so in terms of trends of that regard, I think there will be a bigger shift to the suburbs and to more rural spaces, because by the very nature that remote work is going to become a standard part of the work week. It's not going to be all 5 days. It's not going to be all 4, but I do think at least 1 day a week will be regarded. I think there will be a new agitation for at least 1 day per week of remote work across most industries.
Hey, Edwin,
So one thing that I've thought about is not apartment sharing, but desk sharing. So at my company, we're generally very lax about remote work, but even still, people have their own desk, which is potentially not the most efficient way of doing it, right? So some people are working from home 3 days a week. It's possible to have them share a space inside the office and kind of have desks be less personal spaces and more like temporary workday spaces.
So Matt, that's actually interesting. I can talk about that. That is, some people have already done that. Like my company, they're not really as much like some of the local offices, although that's been done. But like we have like a big, like it was like second headquarters in Nashville, and a lot of people are in and out. They're traveling a lot. You know, they either go out see customers. Sometimes they work from home. Sometimes they're flying different places. So they've adopted this nobody has a desk mentality. And nobody has desk. I mean, like, there is no desk that is tied to anybody's name. And now, there's some, like, known things like, hey, this group, the marketing team usually sits in this area. But it's not at all structured, which actually bothered some people because they were used to having a desk and they do go to the office every day. So I think the more... But I think in general, that's an idea that's probably going to take hold a lot. Maybe have some hybrid solution, like if you're outside of the office X amount of time, you don't really need a desk. That's another thing they were talking about in my company. If you're a salesperson who's only sometimes in the office, you have a huddle space. You don't have a permanent desk. If you're an order manager, you're sitting in the office all day, and you do have a desk, for example. So it is interesting.
Yeah, I feel like that's certainly possible. But on the flip side, here's something to consider. So I think part of the reason why I and a lot of people like going to the office is that home is very distracting, especially if you have children. So I think a lot of people actually miss the office because it's actually very productive in the office, because just working at home is just very distracting, and that's one of the flaws of working at home. So the question is, how do we make the office more attractive for knowledge workers? And this means like no more open plan offices. You have to keep a very basically an office, a very personalized office for each knowledge worker. Let's say an engineer, and then that would be very attractive for someone. For someone like me to go to the office if I know I have a quiet space and I know I have my own desk that's outfitted with the latest gear, a standing desk, and a nice chair and everything. Then I'll be willing to go to the office and not. So if companies want people to come into the office, they have to make it a lot more attractive and to emphasize the attributes and the virtues of why working in the office is better than working at home, which is because it's less distracting. So they have to remove all the open plan stuff and all this other distracting stuff that's the reason why people don't like offices as much.
So I think that's a great point, and I want to share something that I've been thinking about, particularly for this kind of coding guild. So one of the things that I've almost like fantasized or wanted from this thing is there are in New York City social clubs dedicated to other industries, right? Particularly either like I think the arts has very good social clubs dedicated to them, right? So if there were hypothetically a technology one, you could potentially get that same benefit of having a place to go and do work that isn't tied to your company, but that's tied to some sort of membership, right? And so that's something that I think is potentially on the horizon. I don't know if it's necessarily going to happen, but if the reason you go to an office is to get a distraction-free zone, why does that necessarily have to be your company? Because if you can get everything else that you get from going to your company's office through through an online portal, then you can kind of have a quote unquote office at a WeWork, and then from there you just kind of dial into it to whatever work you have.
Hey, Matt, not only if you're right, not only you're right, but actually Amazon has something like what you described, not to the teeth, but they have something similar. And actually, I think I sent you the link. Did you get that one? It was a while ago.
I think that this is maybe digressing a little bit, but I wanted to touch on, I think Ryan had asked what you maybe miss about the office and whatnot. I think that something that I feel is missing is that I really don't talk to anyone that's not on my team anymore. And I used to have lunch with people that weren't on my team. I actually used to learn a ton of stuff from people that were just on the row on the other side of me. And I know I can make a more conscious effort to talk to them over Slack or something, but it's genuinely not the same as having an organic conversation. And that's something I miss kind of dearly.
Start throwing Zoom parties. Organize everyone. Say, hey, let's get together. Everyone grab a bottle of wine. Do it. Get a funny virtual background. Play some Zoom games.
I mean, I totally understand that. And like I said, yeah, I can be making a more conscious effort to do that. So maybe I'll give it a shot. I don't know. It just seems weird to me.
Zoom parties.
Oh, that's cool.
Tom came to one.
Well, I think part of it is hurdles to there's I tend to think of things as there's these barriers to entry, right? So there's you could reach out to someone on another team and message them and be like, hey, I just want to have an impromptu conversation, right? And that's totally feasible, but a lot of us still don't do it. And I think there's a mental hurdle that I think there's going to be technology to overcome. Something that my company does is have a Slack bot that randomly pairs two people and asks them to kind of have a one-on-one or have coffee or something. And I think that's super great. But also over time, I think there is going to be this adjustment to this new normal that hopefully will kind of make it easier to reach out to people that aren't within your group.
Well, and one byproduct of that, if that were to happen, I think actually allows more mobility in a big company for people who aren't in the hub, whatever the hub is. I mentioned, our hub in Nashville. It's usually people in Nashville because it's a hub and there's so many different departments and that are together. They're all talking to each other. They're all networking. Everybody there is always connected. They all know each other, and they're the ones who are typically, moving a lot of jobs or getting promoted or whatever because they know about all the jobs and they have the connections. If that culture became kind of less taboo as far as hey, I can reach out to anybody randomly just online, then that gives an advantage to people who maybe relative to that company don't work at the biggest office or the office with the most cross-functional teams. And they work at a satellite office with only some people of one team. So that could be a game changer for some.
Awesome. I feel like we've been talking about this work from home culture a little bit. So I do want to move into the topic of startups versus big tech. And if someone wants to kind of take that off, please do.
Lee!
What do you want me to say? Something about big tech? No, I just don't know. Our in the worst economy, are all the startups going to not have funding and not hire and sort of the startup industry shrink, or is that not going to happen? Maybe through efficiency. Startups will still thrive and be a viable option to look for employment. But I don't know enough about I don't follow enough tech news to be able to say which direction things are going to trend. To be a bull.
But see, would the question be like, I mean, there's short run and a long run, right? So in the short run, maybe there's less startups or there's less startup jobs. Yeah, I did hear that. But in the
What do you mean
long,
the short run? What is your definition of like is the end of 2020 like short run?
yeah, I'm talking even like less than that, like a few months, 3 months, till people kind of start going back and the economy's not completely
Yeah, but right now just no one's going.
Right, and then but I think eventually, like again, like maybe 2021. I don't think the startup thing would slow down because people are seeing what tech can do, and tech is basically as a concept, not as a specific company, but the idea of tech is what somewhat carried us through this.
Tech is not necessarily startups, right? There's lots of like really big tech companies, or there's a couple really huge tech companies, and there are startups that are, but so I'm not sure if people now like think that the big tech companies are even more desirable to work for, or if it's like less desirable and now startups become sexier and like more appealing to employees.
Well, I think it's not even just the employees. I'm talking like investment wise. Like if you're an investor, I mean, obviously the ship has sailed to invest on like a super large tech company, but you may be willing to take a gamble on a small company because you see what tech can do. Like tech as a concept has a lot of staying power.
Yeah, I agree with that one. Like, I think even like VCs, they have like an agenda of like investing in startups.
If you like we were discussing Zoom parties, if you have the approach where I'm just going to start emailing people and organize a Zoom party, versus like how are we going to organize a Zoom party? The small startup is going to be the guy who is organizing the startup, organizing the Zoom party. The person who's waiting for management to do something, they should go to work at a big company. There's a personality difference that you get from one company versus the other. Also, the impact that you give and all those things.
Yeah, I think that the personality difference I think is a good thing to highlight. One of the things I want to highlight is the if we're thinking about it from a macro perspective, I think that there's like a difference between how these two things behave. So if big tech were to have like a market moving event, what they're going to do is they're going to drop teams and they're going to move people around, right? They're going to move people from one department to another and be like, okay, we're Amazon. We want to put a lot more people on our e-commerce business because that's much more important than all the other things we're doing. Whereas from the macro perspective of startups, right, you're going to see some startups fail, but you're also going to see some startups succeed. And some startups have been actually doing better during this time. And so I think it's hard to kind of compare these two things from just a purely like stability standpoint, because I think people who are in startups are happy jumping from company to company. You don't get stability in there by your company lasting. You get stability by being able to get another job as soon as your company folds over.
Wait, say that last part again. You don't get stability by what?
So, like the traditional way of having like a stable career was by staying at like a successful place. Whereas if you're in a startup, like you can have job security even if your company is folding over by still being in an in-demand industry, right? If you're in e-commerce right now, and if you have a lot of applicable e-commerce skills and tech, like you will, even if the company you're at currently goes under, you're quickly going to be picked up by another place.
Right, and I think that speaks to like, thinking of things in terms of skills more than in terms of institutions. Like having the skills necessary to be able to adapt to different things, I think is more key now than ever, as opposed to just working for XYZ company on your business card.
I guess we're seeing a lot of like businesses getting hit hard just in terms of like startup versus big tech. I'm curious what parts of maybe small tech people are seeing or we expect to perform the worst. Like obviously anything that's like too client facing, that's not really baked into an app. But I'm curious if anyone knows someone or knows of a company that's like really started to struggle in this time, as opposed to a company that's just been like, you know, receiving additional web traffic and has been ultimately benefiting from this? I'm curious what those like edge cases are, or if anyone knows any.
I do. I mean, there's a couple things. So are you just talking about tech though, Evan, or anything?
I'm mostly talking about tech because I think in general everything is hurting, but tech seems to be keeping afloat, like, you know, more so than other industries.
Well, see, that assumption is not necessarily true. It's not everything is hurting. So I'll give you an example.
True.
So I do marketing, actually, e-commerce marketing. We have a agency separate than my day job, me and somebody else. So one of our clients, they're in the gift industry, and they actually, I mean, they sell gifts that are particularly expensive. Let's say $70, and like edible. It's almost like edible arrangements, but a little different. So they're like, who the hell's gonna buy this now? The guy was getting ready to shut down. I mean, he has a couple stores, you know, but he's like a small business owner. Medium, maybe, getting ready to shut down. He's like, he was depressed. Like, the day this thing happened, he was like, there's no way. Like, I'm just going to shut down. I'm not going to sell anything. So we convinced him, like, no, we're going to advertise. This is how we're going to do the message. We're going to focus on, you know, key things and whatever, and blah, blah. So we did that. And the guy is having his best weeks ever. Ever. Yeah, he actually, so he actually, within like 2 weeks, his sales doubled from pre-coronavirus. And then within like another week or two, his sales doubled again. So it's on 4 times the sales, which is normally unheard of for him. He would only see these kind of numbers on like major holidays. That's it, if that, maybe not even.
What's his
very counterintuitive. But the guy's like has more orders than he can fulfill right now. Right now, there is a holiday coming up, which is Mother's Day, and we have to do the opposite, almost not get him orders because he can't handle them. Yeah, he has too much business. He's like, I can't handle this. I'm just gonna get sold.
Make more than
Interesting.
revenue.
Yeah.
Thanks for that.
Yeah, so it's definitely, some things are definitely just counterintuitive. It turns out that there's just some opportunities where people may have not thought that there would be.
Wait, so is this an example of Mustafa's marketing saved the world, or is this an example of back to
I don't know, man. Take it as a plug if you want.
He's a good salesman.
I'm just sharing some insights. I mean, it's it's probably both, but the potential was out there to be had. That's kind of obviously you can't market things out of thin air, so the potential was out there to be had.
Nice.
But what was his annual revenue?
I mean, we're talking about weekly. I'm talking about weekly revenue.
Yeah, so let's annualize it. What was the 1 week that he made?
So for example, 1 week he went from like $12,000 a week to 24 to 48.
Yeah, a lot of digital native brands are growing tremendously with this, and their cost of acquisition down by like 50%, 30%.
Yeah, but he's not digital though. It's like he sells product. Like yes, he could ship it, but it's not. It's a very like tethered business. Like you have to have a storefront and like a place to make the stuff. So yeah, it's pretty interesting. But I mean the digital presence is there if that's what you.
Yeah, like an e-commerce platform, for example. Like you could just display and some e-commerce platform and manufacture and ship it out, right?
Even for the best SaaS companies out there, like M&A valuations went from like 3 times revenue to 2 times revenue, for example. And this is real. These are real numbers.
Hey Matt, are you there?
Yeah.
Oh.
You guys want to move on to the online versus in-person conversation, like how the world is changing around, the differences between online and in-person? I can kind of start this one off. Yeah, I mean, I think this is like a huge change, and part of the reason why, why we're in this conversation is because this kind of group had the same thing, right? We were meeting in person 2 months ago, and now we're meeting online. And I think this is actually a positive thing. Initially, when I thought about moving online, I thought it would be a negative. But now I actually think it's, for this group, this is going to be a huge positive, because now anyone can hop in from anywhere. You can hop in whenever you want, and you can kind of put in as much effort as you want, which is something that in-person things don't allow for the flexibility of. And I think definitely it's going to change how we socialize. More short-term than long-term. I don't imagine people are going to stop going to bars or restaurants in the long term. But I also think that one of the big reasons why I ever went to a bar was to talk to someone, not to actually, be at the bar. And so, I'm like, oh, if I can just call people, that's the socializing I want. I don't need to pay $10 for a beer. I think restaurants are also going to bounce back in some way or another. I think a lot of them are going to shut down. But I potentially some taboos. So if anyone has more thoughts on any of these categories, please contribute.
I mean, I'd be interested to see how gyms are going to react. I mean, I get the feeling right now that gyms have always had crummy. Unless you guys knew a gym that was good. All my experiences with gyms have always been crummy cancellation practices. They get you hostage. They're just trying to milk you for every dollar they can. And basically just make it so hard for you to cancel that you just say F it, just keep the gym membership and just pay them even though you may or may not be going. It'd be interesting to see how they're going to survive this. I know a lot of gyms are shut down. My wife's gym still charged us even though they're shut down. And then they kind of said, well, we'll extend the membership by however many days after. But between that and between the fact that, people may be, coming up with alternatives, like, hey, I'm just going to have to work out from home. I'm not there yet, but people, may be doing that. So it would be interesting to see how that works. Another one, maybe, Matt, I don't know if you want to add it. VR. I'm wondering if this will have any impact on VR for really a lot of these categories: socializing, fitness, networking. I mean, because VR is very physically demanding, depending on what you do. It's like there's games like racquetball in VR. You can play racquetball or tennis in VR. For anybody who's tried it, you actually do sweat. So I'm wondering if that will gain prominence. Like I initially never thought of buying one, but I was thinking that maybe I should just pay the $500 or whatever just to get something so I could stay in shape, for example.
Well, I think VR is going to be huge.
AR is growing much faster versus VR.
And this is the opportunity for the VR industry to double their market. I don't know, triple, depending how long this is going to be stretching. And I never thought about buying a VR glass or something, and now I definitely want to. Hey Lee, matter of fact, you need to hook us up.
Lee, you're giving up VRs? Is that what I'm hearing?
Whoa. Wait, is that a reference to Portal? Is Portal a full VR setup like the one what Mustafa is talking about? I'm not sure.
The main contenders are the details are HTC. They have a line, Vive. They have different lines from there. Oculus, which was bought by Facebook. I think that's what Tom's talking about. And they have different products there. And then Valve, the company that owns Steam, they just came out with the highest end one called the Index. So there's three main contenders really, and other smaller ones, but these are the main ones.
Oh, I was talking about Oculus.
Yeah, he was talking about Oculus. That's what I figured you were talking about.
I didn't even know all the other brands out there.
So I want to touch on the. Lee, go.
What is Portal again then? Because Facebook has Oculus, but now they've been developing this Portal thing. Isn't that just the new, better Oculus?
I've never heard of Portal.
What?
Portal is basically a iPad that connects to another iPad.
Oh, it's video chat. It's like FaceTime.
Video chat. Yeah.
Oh, so the stuff that when I saw Facebook advertising VR to us, they must have been doing the Oculus, and I must have been confusing that with the Portal. Okay, cool.
So
Yeah,
one of the
New York
things I want-
Sports Club still charged me. Pretty upset.
that sucks. I want to touch on the networking and also the online conversations. I think this conversation is going great, but I oftentimes feel like the virtual happy hours and the kind of parties that I've been in a virtual setting kind of haven't. They feel differently than the ones in real life, and part of that is I think what works in a virtual setting is doing one thing and having one having one topic and kind of focusing on one thing. So I've seen it work where you play a singular game where everyone's kind of playing the game, or you, in this case, we're having a topic and we're discussing one topic, or in a meeting you have an agenda as well. Whereas when you're socializing in person, you can have 3 or 4 different things happening. You can have 2 people hop off into their own side conversation. You can have people, go do something else. And I think that's something that's never going to be addressed in the online world, because I think these things work when everyone's doing one thing.
Yeah, and definitely that's definitely an advantage of in person, and even more so if you have kids, you could see that this environment, it does not work for kids. My 4-year-old's going crazy every day, so bored. We normally go out and see other families, or family friends, and when we hang out, and then the kids hang out together in another room or another area. Obviously, that's not possible online. It is interesting, though, on the other side of that coin, it is interesting that there's some things you could do. One interesting thing, me and a group of friends kind of from college, we have a Discord server, kind of like this one, the Coding Guild, but just 6 people. We just hang out in it. And what the guy who runs the server did was he made different rooms for voice. So if we are all talking about something, I might hop in and be like, hey, what are you guys doing? And then me and somebody else start talking. It's all right, well, let's go to another room and keep this conversation going while they talk about Halo, whatever, right? That, is I guess a creative use of technology. It's not quite the same, but it did kind of help us get through. If normally you hang out with people, now you can't, but if you do something like that, I think it goes a long way. So that's kind of one.
Very true. I think people are also warming up to the idea of joining new spaces. So if you are, I think there was a time where it may have been socially appropriate, but maybe awkward to join someone's live stream, depending on what they were doing during their live stream and what your relationship was with that person. But now what I'm noticing is a higher level of comfort joining these different spaces and different live streams. And so I think that we're warming up to that idea. So when we're talking about networking and joining new organizations, instead of accidentally joining somebody's live stream and trying to X out as quickly as possible because of how that might come across or how awkward it would feel because you haven't talked to that person in a few years. Now during this coronavirus environment, it's everyone's kind of reaching out for a connection, and it's kind of understandable to just be hopping in and out of these spaces.
Yeah, I think going on that, I think it's now now it's easier than ever to kind of give someone a call. I think if you actually either have some past connection or if you rekindle, reaching out to someone, I found that people are super accessible and more than happy to kind of take the time to talk to you. Not that I've never, people were a little bit more guarded with their time, whereas now I think people are very open to talking to a stranger or talking to someone new.
Yeah, and I think at least in the short term, it does lower the barrier of entry into, a group online. Because a lot of times even people might have an online group like a Discord or whatever, but they maybe are meeting in person. Let's say talk about real estate or something. An online thing is just extra. So they kind of, just joining online won't give you the full experience, and they might not even be comfortable enough to really talk normally to you. But now the online thing is everybody's meeting. So if you are a group and you are meeting, then you're definitely meeting online. So you would have a lower barrier to entry for a reason you weren't able to meet in person before.
I'd be curious to know how much difficulty people are encountering when they talk, and what I guess I'm trying to get at is there are these social cues that have now been kind of taken out. It's like, you see someone's body posture, their tone, but I guess then on the other side, when you read a text on an email, sometimes I feel like I misinterpret things. So I just wonder how people are handling this different format and how things are kind of getting reconfigured with how we communicate with people.
Yeah, I think part of that is that this is almost like when you become blind, all your other senses kind of become heightened. Where I think now we have a lot less visual cues, but we have a lot more verbal cues, right? And so one of the things in email, I think it's actually a skill to write emails for the very reason that you mentioned. People misunderstand tone, but I think people start to adapt and get better at this skill and stop having to rely on the other things that they had to rely on.
Yeah, I agree on that.
Yeah, the question of spontaneous communication, because I completely agree that online meetings and Zoom meetings and whatnot, and this meeting, for example, they work better when there's something that everybody is focused on. If there's a topic that something is focused on, or a stream that everybody's all focused on. I wonder if there's ways of doing spontaneous communication online that isn't so artificial and awkward. And I think video games, that kind of communication in massive multiple online games, I think that would be interesting medium that could become more mainstream in terms of how
Edwin, you totally read my mind. I was gonna say the same thing. I think that has that group I mentioned. They mainly will meet up now. We used to go over people's houses, each other's houses from time to time, but now nobody can. So to stay in touch, we just will play something, and it made the feeling. It kind of brings everybody together to something it is focused, but it's not so focused. So it's you might start talking about, hey man, how's work? Hey, I just did this. Hey, I might just come out. Or you're just talking about random stuff. In the context of while you're playing a game, which I think is pretty good. Interestingly enough, I heard that the World Health Organization has recommended video games now because of they help you socially kind of cope with this kind of thing. And one of my friends made the comment that this is the same organization that before called video game addiction a disorder. So now people are kind of seeing that there is some sort of advantage to video games. So what's it called? So there. I think that also took some of the taboo off of it as well.
So this reminds me of fantasy sports, where I think one of the big reasons people participate in fantasy sports isn't necessarily the sport itself, but the community around it, right? Having a thing to do, having something to talk about, then drives other conversations and drives other socializing. Oddly enough, fantasy sports has essentially died because there's no sporting events, which is kind of a topic we've left off this list, but is an interesting topic nonetheless.
I had a successful SaaS company that was half their revenue, or 90% of the revenue came from sports. So it went from a $30 million valuation to nothing until sports come back.
Wait, it went from 31 to what?
To basically nothing, because they were making 10, 12 million gross revenue, and now they've lost 90% of their revenue because just because the nature of whatever the economic driver was of the company.
Right.
We haven't really touched on restaurants, but I think Alex was the one that wanted to talk about it, but he's not here. If anyone wants to make a comment, otherwise we can kind of move on to how people are learning, which is of interest, particularly to me.
Yeah, the restaurants is just real quick. I think the restaurants that are adapting are the ones that are able to mobilize quickly and deliver and capitalize on delivering. I know you want to move on from the place, so we.
Oh no! I don't want to move on. It felt like the conversation was dying at touch.
Okay. I mean, yeah, I do feel that way. Incidentally, we've worked with a restaurant, and we're kind of seeing that. Being able to deliver and kind of mobilize and effectively. Get your message out there, whatever can help you grow your sales on that front, even while your in-store sales effectively collapse, and not decline, just collapse. So if you're able to pivot that way, I think as a restaurant you can survive right now, and will probably be in a better position later because people who bought people who bought online will kind of continue to buy online, and people who are now buying in store as well. Some restaurants won't be able to do that, and they'll just go completely under. And then I think the restaurant scene in general, if you're not capable of delivering, it's going to be a really long time before you can come back. Because I would think that restaurants are probably some of the last things that people are going to start flocking to, because it's not that essential.
So I think there's also a good point about something later down the line of the taboo of personal space, right? So there's all New York City restaurants are super packed, besides the very fancy ones. And in a world where everyone wants 6 feet around them, or at least some personal space, how are these restaurants going to manage? Are they going to drive up prices? Are they going to still I think they have to adapt in some way, but how do they actually adapt? Okay. Does anyone want to touch on anything else in the online versus in-person realm of things?
It's not what I think, it's what I see in the market today, is that companies that are direct to consumer or some kind of online only, the online only is great, and it's great for this market, but there's a huge glass ceiling that these companies hit unless they actually have physical location. Clearly, it wasn't the case in companies like Amazon, for example, with brick-and-mortar stores. And even companies that were digital first in general across the markets, they're starting to go on store shelves and open up their own retail location. So, the restaurant, the retail store, all those things, they thrive and are more profitable with physical location. Now, you have to ask yourself, what does that mean? And how does the physical location have to change to adapt to mobile first and adaptivity? Is the store the experience and then you have deliveries, or does it's because it's definitely not going to be like a JCPenney's or a Macy's anymore.
So now I have an interesting point that I want to bring up is when the world started adopting mobile devices, there was kind of this people were skeptical about mobile devices being in the sense that why develop a mobile app? People are going to use your app on a desktop. Whereas now most apps or most companies adopt kind of a mobile first philosophy where they think their website definitely has to be nice on mobile, or they even wanted to develop a mobile app before they develop a desktop app or a web app, because most people are going to be interacting with them on mobile. And I'm wondering if there's going to be websites or if there's going to be restaurants that are takeout first, right? So every restaurant in the world kind of always thought of takeout as an afterthought. And so I'm curious if
they're called ghost kitchens.
Okay, that makes sense.
So
what are they called?
Ghost kitchens. So
ghost kitchens.
What you do is if it costs about $150 to $5,000 a square foot in New York for a retail location that's fenced and all that stuff. The ghost kitchen is basically you rent a second or fifth floor location or a lower level location, and it costs you $50 a foot. And the difference is that, you know, you could have 10 restaurants located in one ghost kitchen. But the ghost kitchen charges you 30% of every dollar you generate, and then Seamless takes another 30%, and et cetera, et cetera. But there's many restaurants that have started to open up over the past couple of years or 5 years that were ghost kitchen locations. Like, they have no physical store.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's interesting as well. Okay. If anyone wants to come back to this, we can at a later point. But I think the next one is of particular interest to me, and I think it's potentially one that might drastically change the most. And it's how the education space is going to adapt. And I think short term it's trying its best, but I think the long term there actually may be. Long term there might actually be quite a few changes in how people learn. And I think there already have been trends, namely in things like the reverse classroom, or a lot of places have flipped the classroom around, where instead of assigning homework to be done at home and the lecture in the classroom, they'll assign lectures to be listened to at home, and then the classwork is actually the homework. And I think that's something that can be further expanded in a time like this, or something that a lot of the infrastructure that we're building out right now is definitely going to help out. And I think, I think high schools are adapting, middle schools are adapting, college degrees, right? So like even professions, right? Major professions like law and doctor, you still need to keep giving out law degrees, but how do you manage to teach people enough in a virtual setting to make sure that the quality of your students hasn't changed, or the quality of your graduates?
I mean, even the Supreme Court, as of like now or at the beginning of May, they're going to be able to, you can deliberate from your house. So everything is, even that sector, which, sectors that would never be digital are becoming digital. So it'll adapt in a certain way, but like, you don't have to actually go to the school. I mean, you have to think that education systems are going to start monopolizing on it. So Harvard will accept 100,000 students this year because everyone's going online. And all these tier 2, tier 3 schools we put out of business. And no one can say anything, because if Harvard's accepting 100,000 people at HBX, their online school, why would I go to like community college?
So I do think there's a lot of tangential things related to schooling, and there's like the things that we might not necessarily want, and one of those is in New York City. The public schools are a big means for providing social security to people, right? So this is people who don't have a place, who don't have like stable housing or things like that. Yeah. And so schools actually provide that. And so this has been a general strategy in the city to be like, okay, let's do these things through.
Public school system is extremely important because many children in the public school system in New York City depend on the food that it provides.
Yeah.
It's so bad that like even we're getting text messages from the government stating you could pick up breakfast, lunch, and dinner at these like locations in public school, and it's because of the fact that the children can't go to school to pick up to eat their food.
Well, so my question would be like, are we going to see the divorce of these two things, right? So we've essentially doubled down that schools were a great way of providing all this value to people that couldn't get it elsewhere. But now seeing that A, education might go online, and B, that when things go wrong, they actually go horribly wrong. Like, are we going to reconsider these policies and consider other ways of providing people with like food security?
I mean, the world thought carbohydrates is a great idea, and the same thing, people thought McDonald's was a great idea, but COVID-19 is killing 45,000 people, I think, in the United States, and heart disease is killing up to 3 million per year. So I think that, like, even if it's a bad decision or a good decision, regardless of what the decision is, everything normalizes.
I do think there kind of is new normals, and I think this is something that Mustafa touched on, is his point of it, that COVID's not going to create new trends, it's going to accelerate trends, or it's going to show like how things are changing. And so I almost think of going back to like evolution being not a slow and steady process, but evolution is oftentimes like nothing, and then all of a sudden something changes, and then there's a drastic change. I think Lee's trying to talk.
Oh, yeah. So there was a thing he said earlier about Harvard accepting 100,000 students this year. Is that a fact, or is that a hypothesis? Like, did Harvard say that they're accepting way more students this year?
No. This is basically hypothesizing. You have Harvard created a new college called Example.
Yeah.
Offers like anybody could just register for a degree. There's no like admission process.
Yeah. There's no admission process. So even like SC for like Stanford development, at least has that. So you're saying Harvard doesn't?
No, I'm not saying. I'm just taking it as an assumption. But like, if people start normalizing not going to college campuses, because all those college campuses, you have to imagine that people from all over the world, like even the poorest kid in Africa, the government gives him a computer and he can attend classes at Harvard, going to HBX, and it'd be extremely cheap because he's not paying for room rents, local food. It's just if we're being futurists here, we have to think like what is the next step? If you read about like John President of the United States, his son had to go to Harvard, but Harvard was the only school available at the time. Impressive at the time. Eventually, you're going to have 100,000 kids are taking, or a million children are taking classes at Harvard or whatever these top schools are. Those top schools will survive. And then those lower little colleges that are basically like the English degrees that,
So I think there's a lot of into going to a particular school, especially when ones like Harvard. And I think the big one is like networking. Going back to the whole conversation of online networking versus in, I think they're like drastically different. Although you can learn all the same things, you may not get the same experience. And even like there are more than enough resources. If you were just go resource standpoint, there should be no reason that making money off of, because literally everything's on. But nonetheless, these institutions, and it's because a lot of it is like organizational value is huge, but again, that can be part of the curriculum, but also like all the intangible benefits, like all the people you meet in the classroom are super. Not only that, the meeting in person kind of creates these relationships that foster kind of better things, and that's where you kind of get someone invested in your future and ultimately get them to help. Whereas if someone went to Harvard X with, I don't really care.
No, I mean, it's the same thing with joining the Harvard plus any alumni doesn't care to join.
Yeah.
And if you go to like the first.
Hey guys, just 1 second. Are you guys the audio? It's okay because the audio is a little iffy on my side here.
I think it's just your audio, Tom.
Oh, okay, good. Okay, never mind. Just keep going, please. Sorry.
No, I think I definitely the top tier colleges are going to, in order to make money, especially nowadays, because a lot of people are trying to get a tuition back value. They're not going to pay this much period. So I think the top 2 colleges were a lot of degrees for as many remote students as possible. I know a lot of the top CS colleges are already doing it for master's degrees. They're offering an equivalent degree as their on program and they're just offering them and this is like top ranked computer science college.
But that was true before COVID, right?
Yeah, but that's true before COVID to accelerate it. Because right now it's only happening to the master's programs, right? But I feel like it's also going to happen to undergrads and it's going to be accelerated.
Just in terms of the education space and speaking about Harvard, I think, to Matt's point, a lot of these are resourced very differently. The value benefit of attending Ivy League schools, there can be an argument made for. Obviously, Harvard has existed for a really long time, very differently from other university, right? Also, to Lee's point, he said, to COVID, this was the case. We're seeing now that we are online learning space, it's an equalizer, right? These different spaces are going to have to work really to differentiate themselves from one another to just show that actually the best in this space, a great equalizer space, hiding up in the space to show that, okay, the beam is greater than being on there. So I think that a lot of these university online learning environments are challenged by Untitled or it to make them.
Yeah, totally agree. I think one of the things with MOOCs was go to and listen to one of their lectures when literally the best literally wrote the text subject is offering a pretty very cheaply online, right? So I feel like that's going to accelerate even. It's going to become a superstar economic market where everybody is just going to gravitate to the top professors of the top universities who literally wrote the text. And if they teach very well, then the whole going to watch the lectures of the canonical professors, for example, or look at the canonical text.
There's a great opportunity to join those spaces. Like at the end of the day, everybody has a choice to make. If somebody wants to learn at a community college, or they can just as easily get the same information or similar information online, right? There's an opportunity. I think that there are a lot of different, when we're talking about learning styles, at the end of the day, it just comes down to what works for every individual person. And that person needs to make a choice what works for them. Learning style vary drastically from person to person. Some people are sure stuff in a physical space. Other people are okay with online spaces. Some people want to be in a arts kind of space, or Ivy League privates, and that's just what works for them. And some people are willing to pay a premium for that, and other people want to get that for. And I don't think that one is necessarily better than the other. Some things work differently for different.
So I want to make 2 points. One is what I think Harvard actually sells as from a business, and I want to move away from them selling uneducated. They sell, which is actually so, because I think what they do is ability to put something on your resume that says, I went to Harvard. Now other people look at that and they're like, oh, this person went to Harvard. And I think that's super, that's like that actual tangible so I think this idea of Harvard giving out 10 times, 100 times as many kind of falls out of that. You know, now the you don't get as much social because so many people have this degrees, right? There's this market of Harvard degrees, and now Harvard degrees matter. The other thing,
any brand is going to milk it. Like, you know, Columbia did the same thing. And, you know, Louis Vuitton does the same thing. Anybody make a buck by leaning on their brand recognition is so expected, right?
Yeah, I also think the other thing that I want to touch on is that professors in these schools aren't the best lecturers. I think they're hired because they're good at their research, which doesn't always translate to actually being good at teaching. A lot of times they're like, if you're the best intro to computer science lecturer in the world, you're not going to get, they're not hiring the best of that. What they're hiring is for people to push research. You get things like, oh, a Harvard study, and oh, Harvard published this thing was discovered at Harvard, and that helps with their brand recognition. So I don't necessarily think.
Also, it's not like community colleges are like better hiring, you know, the most excellent professors at teaching. You don't really have a good way as an institution of interviewing for that anyway. I think it's fair that the best professor, or like the most sought after Harvard professor, is not, you know, that doesn't. They're worse than community college teachers, right? Not necessarily.
Just to broaden the conversation a little bit, I'm also thinking about it in not necessarily like post-secondary, across the board. I wish I could be a fly in some of these classrooms today. I don't have children, but fly in a classroom on one of these to see how they're learning, and to see if any of these elementary schools, middle schools, high schools have really researched, you know, student learning theory at all, especially online learning, to best engage. There's a lot of research on this stuff, and I just don't know if it's being tapped into, and like whether or not, like how do we know if these students learning successfully or if these teachers are teaching successfully? So I would be really interested to be a fly on the wall in some of these classes.
Yeah, maybe maybe the move to online actually holds teachers.
Hey, man. Good if they're being video recorded. Also, hopefully they're.
Hey, Rich.
How's it going, man? I was gonna plug in and say the best hackers in the world are on it, quote unquote. You know what I mean? I kind of agree with the whole sentiment about, you know, what's the social value that you get out of university study. But anyway, yeah.
So yeah, I mean, so touching back to what I wanted to do here is, I have like documents written about it, but part of like this, what I want from here is the community around education, right? So education, I think, comes in two parts. One is the actual tangible lessons that you're learning, but then there's also like a community that kind of supports you. So what I've been trying to do with the Coding Guild and Tom and I have been working on trying to make something that kind of can make this kind of community aspect in a digital era.
In that direction, can I actually make a...
Yes, please.
So maybe because of the digital era, it'll, you know, be easier to find like collaborators for personal projects. That's what I'm hoping for. Personal Plea Mustafa and I have been working on a project where we need to integrate like Python to build a reinforcement learning environment that's wrapped around a C++ game. And so if anyone has experience with like single machine like socket-based communication between Python and C++, or with C++ in general. We would love collaborators helping us with that part of the project. My name's Lee. Reach out to me however you want. I don't know all the people who's talking names. They sound very smart and possibly like they know C.
Hey, Matt. Matt.
This is my first time using Discord. Is there a way is there a chat box somewhere? Like if what are you saying, or you want to like add to that point?
Yeah, go to text. So basically the way Discord works is there's different channels, if you will, but some of them are voice, like this one, but some of them are text. So if you see on the left-hand pane above voice, there's text. It's just called text. Just go there, and then you could see, like I said,
Oh, but you can't like sync like as we are in this voice call. You can't pull up a chat box in this.
You could DM somebody. You could right click, Lee, and message to him.
Right.
But usually every server will have that has voice also. So I mean, in this case, this is a thread.
I was thinking of some Zoom has like a chat box for all of the Zoom.
Oh, right.
Discord doesn't have that. I think there's a lot of functionality you want about just like being able to search for a conversation. You're not sure exactly who you had that conversation with. Like a lot of stuff doesn't exist.
Cool.
So you got it. Discord has a different philosophy, and I think it's very interesting. Discord is more of like a steady thing than a temporal thing. Like Zoom, like a Zoom call, for example, only exists when else it's happening, and then that call is ethereal, disappears. It's more steady. Like there's a server, it come in and you leave. It's almost like it has a semblance of physicality to it. Like if there's a WeWork, you walk into the WeWork and it exists. And you walk into a room, and then you leave, but the WeWork is still there. That's kind of how Discord is, right? You have a room that has audio. You can walk into it, but you can walk out, but the room's still.
Mustafa, were you the one saying also before that you can like hop into a room? You know how Zoom has breakout room? Is that an opportunity in Discord also? People and jump into a different.
Yeah, I was talking about Discord. Discord is very well optimized for that kind of thing. Like we could, whoever is the server leader here, you can easily add other rooms, maybe side chat for voice or whatever. But if you do any sort of anything on a computer, it's very easy to. Like right now, Matt is sharing his screen, but I could just as easily I could just as easily also share my screen, and you guys could pick which screen to, for example. So you could have and you can see who's live. So you could have during a lot of sidebar conversation. Maybe we're all working on a coding project, and me and Lee and somebody else. So we go to another room, and Matt and somebody else is going to work on the front end. So they're here, and John Worth, hey, how you guys making out? Right? It can, but I think it's pretty.
That's amazing. In terms of for a collaboration, I like the collaboration are here in Discord, and in thinking about education standpoint, in space that are online, get students or just people in spaces to engage with one another.
And for learning space and Discord in particular, what learning environments do on Discord is let's say you have a TA and you buy TAs and you want to help, but if you have a single environment, it's a little hectic.
or maybe like one PA helping five. And so what these type of channels on Discord will do is they'll create like 5 different channels. And if you want help with a topic, you just try to find like a channel where no one's actively talking in, and then you start talking there, and someone will like come in and sit.
Oh, that's interesting. That's really interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I think Discord has potentially a lot of benefits. Actually, anyone here can do voice and text channels as they want. So far, there's no permissions around it. And I do think that there's a little bit of a hurdle to adopting Discord, but I like a lot of their philosophies around things. So we're kind of starting to get to the 9 o'clock time. In terms of like some of the other topics that we can touch on, I was considering kind of bumping these to another talk. I think a real estate conversation could in fact be a hour and a half long conversation. And honestly, some of these can be pulled in together in some way or another. In terms of new technologies, I think that's generally what we do as a group. We always kind of bring what we're working with and present on it. So that's an ongoing thing. I think the taboo of personal space has already been brought up in some form. And then the Spanish flu and the multi-season COVID, the potential multi-seasonality of this is, I think that's an interesting topic, but I think it might be a little bit outside of the scope technical conversation around the impact of COVID on software engineering and the technology space in general. So, unless anyone has any like last minute thoughts, I'll kind of close out the conversation in a second. But feel free to share any last minute thought.
Just one last thought here. It's just a big thank you to everyone to be participating in. This was by far really, really cool, and I am enjoying this to the minute. Like, thank you guys.
Awesome. Mustafa, anything?
It cut out a little bit. What was the last thing said? I'm sorry. Just the voice was.
No, I was just thanking everybody that this is really cool. Like, and basically was just saying thank you.
Oh, absolutely. No, I think this was great. Thank you, everybody. I think this was really good, and it gets it's a different type of session, but even the whole thing, just the coding guild idea and just being able to drop in and out, on these who can't make it, it's great. And this kind of session does social itch a little bit, we're obviously not able to, like we all said, right? So this does definitely help with that, and it's good to see what other people are seeing and feeling about this situation. So this is pretty cool.
Hey Mag, I'll give you a comment. It didn't feel like I was hopping onto like a developer coding guild. It felt like you guys were like innovators and entrepreneurs, and so it was kind of that's what caught my attention immediately. So I enjoyed the conversation, listening for about an hour. So thanks, man.
Awesome. Yeah. Thank you, everyone, for contributing. And I definitely felt this conversation went a lot better than I anticipated, and I already had like high expectations of it. I think based on like a lot of my other Zoom calls, there's a huge frustration around talking over each other, and I largely didn't happen, which was awesome. So as like an organization, so this is like a new format that we've introduced this week. We've also introduced the YouTube live stream. We have 3 people watching it, which is probably me, Tom, and someone else. How that goes. So going from here, the big question needs to double down on is, should we be doubling down on the lecture style or the discussion So that's kind of going to be a big question going forward. So if you have any feedback on it, I'm definitely more than comfortable take. At a certain point, when this community starts to grow, when we have too much content, obviously we're just going to pick up new nights, and it's going to be that's how we're going to expand. I don't think we're quite at that point, so we're going to continue to balance these two things, however best we. But yeah, in general, I think this has been so much fun. I think it's great hearing your guys' opinion, and thank you for showing up.
Absolutely.
Thanks, guys. Yeah, it was very.
Thank you.
Awesome. All right, I'll be sending off. You'll see a recap email tomorrow. Moving forward. On a side note, if anyone present on, obviously please reach out. We're always looking for kind of people to present on. And if anyone has another disc that they want to bring up, well, we're also more than comfortable giving you space to kind of lead one of these conversations. That would be great in and of itself.
Sorry, I was going to say, you keeping the audience primarily anonymous, or are you guys sharing with everyone?
We all know each other.
Yeah.
I was really curious who you. I wanted to ask.
I'll be the hacker. Matt and I know each other. We can let you know next time, I guess, if I hop on. Thank you. All right.
Yeah, so sometimes we've done some introduction. I'll kind of think about the general format. Well, it's largely some subset of people that are within my network, but obviously some people have hopped in there, and so yeah. I mean, feel free to share what as long as you're not doing anything too bad. I don't mind people kind of staying on.
Right. Matt, is it? I know you're asking, maybe we want to talk offline. That's fine too for feedback. Maybe we can alternate different types of sessions or different segments where between discussion and somebody presenting something. And I don't know if there's interest in this, but maybe we all working together on a problem, LeetCode or whatever, or we have 3 different types of sessions or segments or whatever. We kind of alternate, keep it fresh.
Yeah, I mean, so generally the way I would like to do it is I like the coding guild is in charge of creating a lot of the structures, and then within we kind of give you time and space to kind of do your own. So I've largely been trying to come up with my own ideas if that happen. But if you're like, hey, I want to take half an hour and I want to do a live coding on LeetCode things, and I want to do one that I haven't done before, and I want to go through the entire process. So in an ideal world, what happens in 2 months from this kind of, we give you a slot of time, and then whoever is interested in that is just going to show up to that. Right now we just do Wednesdays. We're going to be a little bit trying to cater to who shows up on Wednesdays. Yep. But if the ideal scenario, anything and everything goes, and then people can kind of opt into it.
How do we request a topic now? I remember at first, in person, there were talks of stuff. I don't know. What's the current plan for requesting a sub?
So we currently don't have any
request C++ would suck. I know that all of your friends are experts on both of these subjects and can teach them confidently. And I hope I'm teaching that we have a session on.
Hey man, we need Michael here.
I second the request.
Yeah, so what I've generally found is that, or what I've thought of requesting topic really come to fruition in the sense that the only way would it present on something that was requested is if they could have already done it, but they thought no one would have wanted to hear. And generally, I'm already at the point where I'm kind of bothering people to find things to present on. So, I don't have anyone that has C++. We may start to introduce things. If you guys know a little bit about the structure here, you'll read me here. And within that read me, there's all this information essentially a link that allows you to post lessons. So we can update it to include something about asking for lessons. But at that point, I don't really have a method for kind of figuring out how to make sure that we deliver on that.
I just when we
the channels, right? Just post Lee, just post on a channel what you want to be seen next week or like
which channel, the text channel.
Yeah, Matt and Tom. This kind of, we have two README channels. We have a jet text, so I'm not sure which channel.
Yeah, that's the question. Because when we initially started, like a lot of us like to teach, and so like my guess is that there are like some people that are already here that already are experts and just would assume that like no one wants to learn like lots of subjects that other people would want to learn. So it's just like how do we organize, like how do we link those two? I'm not trying to be like too me specific. I think it's a little bit of a general thing.
Yeah, no, I think it's like a very good thought. To answer specifically, I don't anyone that I know that is a particular expert in C++. To answer Edwin's thing of like how we're thinking about this kind of goes into a topic that I think of as domains, right? I think this coding guild, it goes a little bit past just the lessons, right? So ideally, there isn't just the lessons. It's going to be ideally like an office hours folder where if someone wants to host what is quote unquote office, they can create a voice chat there and people can hop in. So the idea is that the top level channels, the three, README, General, and Whiteboard, are things that are applicable to the entire coding guild, and then everything kind of within lessons is outside of that. Within lessons, two of them are actually blocked that you can't post in. They are README and bot. In README, only Tom and I can post, and in bot, only a bot can post. So the text channel is the only channel you can post. And so that would be the ideal channel to kind of post this question. And then as like a side note, realizing kind of the confusion that this is, we'll take the time to figure out what is the best way to make this intuitive going forward. Does that answer your question?
Whose question, Lee or Edwin? I think it answered my question for sure.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. No. Yeah. That makes a lot. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Ideally, that information ready. But I'll update them to me. They're a little bit more thorough and that people can touch on. And so it's come up how Discord works. If you're on chat or you're on a folder, feel free to do that. So one of the things that Lee, you're creating, and so I want to kind of also create the space for, if you want to add all of your project stuff, that's something that I'm more than confident I think actually be a benefit to this community. And so that's something I also want to bring up.
How do you create a folder? Do you have a channel on?
So if you go in the top left, Tom, you have a feedback loop and we can't hear you, so you should not. Okay, so if you click on the Coding Guild, there's going to be a drop down and there's create category. Calling a folder is a cat, and then after that you just on a folder or on a category right of it, and it says create channel.
All right. Cool. Yeah. Next week, I'll do some Leap build tutorial. But, yeah. Anything else? Anything else we need to discuss?
No. Thanks again. Thanks again. So everyone, thank you again from the bottom of my heart.
Yeah. This was a lot of fun. All right. Thanks.
Thank you, guys.